Hello all and welcome. This week we're going to be taking a look at chapter 10. We're going to see kingdoms start to be formed again, kind of creating the modern map of Europe again. We're obviously still 1,000 years back, but we're going to start to see countries that we would recognize, borders we would recognize, things that become very familiar to us as history is going to go on. So specifically this chapter kind of looks at individual countries and how they're formed and how the different kingdoms are put together to kind of create this larger group. And the first country it takes a look at is England. Now, England prior to 1066 is being ran by the Anglo-Saxons. Their history is kind of a northern German, Scandinavian history, kind of Vikings, all these different aspects. They've been running England for a number of years, but in 1066, we're going to see the Norman invasion. The Normans come from the Normandy region of France. And in 1066, at the Battle of Hastings, the Normans are going to defeat the Anglo-Saxon forces, and now we have a new dynasty, a new English king. But it makes things kind of interesting because that English king is actually a French nobleman, and for a long time, hundreds of years, French is the official language of the country of England, which is kind of an interesting little historical bit. What this is going to do, though, is create more conflict on the continent of Europe, because think of it like this. The lands that the King of England owns, obviously of the island of England, but he also owns multiple pieces of territory back in France, Normandy, which is the northern part of France. So he's technically subject to the King of France at this time. So the King of France can theoretically tell the King of England what to do, but only in certain parts. So it gets really complicated and it leads to lots of conflicts between the two. France, though, kind of uses this as an opportunity to invade these parts of France that are being held by the King of England, and the country that we know as France begins to grow. And again, we kind of see this throughout chapter 10. Also, during this time period, we see the creation of the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta is kind of the first document where we really see restraints being put on a monarchy or a king. And again, if you were to read the Magna Carta, there would be some things in there we recognize even within our modern society, right? So again, restrictions on what the government can do, rights of the accused, rights of prisoners, fair trials, all of these different aspects that we would consider kind of part of a modern society, you really start to see in the Magna Carta. Again, that goes all the way back to 1215. So again, over 800 years ago, some of these ideas are being put to the forefront. All right, during France, I mentioned they begin to grow during this time, kind of taking over parts of France that were owned by the King of England. They're able to take them, they're able to defend them, and we really start to see French society being created. And one of the aspects we're going to see in French society, and this is going to go all the way up to the French Revolution in the late 1700s, early 1800s, is this idea of the estates. So basically classifications of members of society, and there's 3 estates in French society. The first estate is the clergy, and it kind of shows how large and powerful the Catholic Church is at this period of time. They're at the top of the pyramid. They're huge landowners. They collect tithes, 10% of everyone's income. So again, they are bringing in huge quantities of money. They're huge landowners. Again, they're arguably the most important aspect in that society. The second estate we're going to see is the nobles, the other people that own large quantities of land. They're the wealthy, kind of the important. Then we get to the third estate, and this would be the townspeople, your peasants, kind of your normal folk, right? So again, that's really how French society is divided. And again, it's going to be divided that way for the next 800 years until the French Revolution. Some other places around Europe that are beginning to kind of form and change shape, we see what we would call modern-day Germany. Now, there isn't a modern-day Germany. Again, there isn't going to be a Germany until the 1860s. So again, we are still hundreds of years off from that occurring, but you do have people that live in the central part of Europe that speak a very similar Germanic language. So the best thing I would say is that people would be German. There just isn't a Germany. So again, a little bit of a different way of looking at that there, but we see Frederick I, we see his son Frederick II, Henry VI. All of these are going to be German princes that control large quantities. People vote them into power. So all the little mini principalities, all these little tiny kingdoms pick one of their own, kind of be in charge of all of them. And again, you have these extremely successful people. They take over, obviously, the German states. They take over parts of northern Italy, southern Italy. And this really begins to worry the Pope, right? At this time, the Pope is not only the head of the Catholic Church, but also the ruler of the Papal States, which is kind of a chunk of Italy in and around Rome. So again, they have their own military, they have their own economy. So again, they feel threatened. So again, not only are you kind of the head of the Catholic Church, but you're also the leader of a government as well. So kind of filling both of those roles. And again, we see countries kind of trading municipalities. Sometimes they get conquered, they get reconquered, they're traded off. All these different things are happening during this time as we create a modern Europe. Christianity is also expanding at this time. We see Christianity getting into the Scandinavian countries, places like Denmark and Sweden and Norway, and we see the expansion of Christianity east into what we would call the Slavic regions. So places like modern-day Poland or Lithuania are going to be conquered by a group called the Teutonic Knights. Now, these Teutonic Knights were originally knights. Obviously, they're the military people on horseback that we would think of that were designed to protect or were created to protect people visiting the Holy Land. So they were there to help these pilgrims get from point A to point B in a safe fashion. We're going to talk about the Crusades in a minute, but once these Crusades are over, these are extremely well-trained military forces with nothing to really do. So they basically said, hey, why don't you guys go east, conquer the pagans, turn them into Christians, and you can have all of their land. And they're like, all right, sounds good to us. So again, places like modern-day Poland, Lithuania, those type of regions are conquered by the Teutonic Knights during this time. One of the things we see emerging from the Catholic Church at this time is different orders or different groups. For example, the Franciscans, the Dominics. So again, these are groups within the Catholic Church. Obviously, they're practicing the Catholic religion, but they're focusing on different aspects of it. So whether it's charity, whether it's poverty, whether it's whatever the case may be. And again, they try to appeal to as many different followers as possible. So again, these different orders appear, and we still see them today. Again, if you kind of look at maybe like Catholic high school names, they're directly related to these groups and what these groups were trying to do. All right, one of the other things we see during this time is the Catholic Church, and in order to raise money and to help people get to heaven, start to sell what they call indulgences. So the thinking in the Catholic Church at this time is when you died, you spent a certain amount of time in purgatory. This kind of hell-like place that you lived until you were clear enough or pure enough, purgatory, in order to get into heaven. Now, again, the better of a person you were on earth, the less time you would spend there. But what if you did bad things? What if you didn't want to have to spend a lot of time in purgatory? You could buy yourself an indulgence. You could basically donate a certain amount of money to the Catholic Church, and they would give you a document saying that you had to spend less time in purgatory. Now, obviously, that sounds a little bit maybe silly to us in a modern sense, but this becomes the norm in Catholic Europe at this time. Some people like this. Obviously, some people are going to push back. We're eventually going to get into religious reformations, and a lot of it does have to do with these ideas of selling indulgences. And a lot of what people are purchasing when they buy those indulgences are relics. So you could buy a cloth that Jesus was wrapped in. You could buy a splinter that came from his cross. You could buy, the toenail clippings of St. Peter, whatever the case may be. And again, in purchasing these relics, all right, you're giving money to the Catholic Church. We consider those indulgences. It's going to then lower your time in purgatory. Now, I mentioned the Crusades earlier, and that's what we want to take a look at next. Again, we looked at the rise of the Islamic faith and how they're able to take over parts of the Middle East, North Africa. They're into Spain. They're kind of knocking on the door of the Byzantine Empire down into Persia. Eventually, Catholic Europe is going to take note of this. And Catholic Europe is going to say, wait a second. All right, a lot of those places that you're conquering, that you're calling your own, really belong to us. All right, they're the basis of our Christian faith. Places like Bethlehem and Jerusalem that tell the story of Jesus and all these different things, we want them back. And in order to get them back, we're going to militarily take them back. And that's really the idea of the Crusades. And there are a number of Crusades that are going to take place over several hundred years. Some are successful in their goals, some are not so successful. Again, there's kind of a variety of crusades that are going to occur at this time. But I'll highlight a couple of them. The first one being obviously the First Crusade. Again, the Europeans kind of come down through Asia Minor, kind of through Constantinople. They are able to retake what we would call the Holy Lands. They're able to occupy Jerusalem. And I would point out, when they take Jerusalem, they slaughter all the Islamic inhabitants, right? If they can get their hands on you, they're just simply killing you. And I point that out because eventually Jerusalem is going to fall back into Islamic hands. and they're treated way differently. All right, the Islamic people do not seek revenge. They do not slaughter the Christians, the Jews that they find in the city. They basically come to an agreement that says, look, we understand these are your holy sites. You're allowed to come. You're allowed to pray at them. But again, we run this city. This is our territory. This is our land. And again, that's going to kind of ebb and flow. Things are conquered. Things are lost. Again, over the next several hundred years. The other crusade I would point out is the Fourth Crusade. Because the Fourth Crusade, while kind of concocted, funded, designed to go take the Holy Land, ends up in Constantinople. Now remember, Constantinople is part of the Byzantine Empire. They are Catholic. But remember, they're Greek Orthodox Catholic as opposed to being regular Catholic. They don't necessarily agree or see eye to eye. So even though they're theoretically teaching the same thing, they don't necessarily agree. So you have all of these Crusader soldiers ending up in Constantinople, and they're like, hey, you know what? Let's just go ahead and take this place instead, right? We're already here. Let's go ahead and conquer it. Part of this was spurred on by the Venetians, who want Constantinople to kind of disappear so they can increase their ability to trade in the eastern part of the Mediterranean. So again, instead of going to the Holy Lands and fighting a Muslim force, it's actually just a Catholic group of Crusaders attacking a Catholic city in Constantinople and basically sacking it. While Constantinople is able to kind of rebuild, the Byzantine Empire is going to exist in the future. It really weakens it overall. And by 1453, the Byzantine Empire is conquered by Islamic forces, and Constantinople becomes Istanbul, which we know it as today. Let's see if there's any other important pieces of information. All right, that looks like it's it for Chapter 10. So again, just remember, make sure that you're taking your quiz for the week and you do your discussion post. Have a great week.